So I wanted to look at Antichrist, but I thought, let's go back a little bit and set the stage for Antichrist. So remember when we looked at the kingdom of Satan, and we said that Satan started ruling the hearts of men really from Cain. And then his kingdom just gets full and full of people, and then you end up with Nimrod, who is the founder of Babylon. So Nimrod is the founder of Babylon. He's a great and mighty hunter before the Lord. Or you could actually translate that, he's a mighty hunter against the Lord. He's Antichrist. So he founds Babylon. And Babylon is a spirituality that continues past Nimrod's time. It infects the world. And so at some point we'll look at some of their gods and how their gods are even manifested today in pop culture today. And they will manifest again. They're always there, even in the Catholic Church. Especially one of their gods is manifested in the Catholic Church. So what we're going to look at today is the kingdoms that are under the kingdom of Satan, out of which Antichrist will come. So when we look at history, the history of the world, we see that there was the Roman era, and before the Roman era there was the Greek era, and there's all these different eras, and we see them as different kingdoms. But biblically, they're all part of the same thing. It's a continuum. It just goes from one into the next, into the next, into the next. But it's not different things. It's part of the one big thing, which is the kingdom of Satan. So let's go to Daniel. And Daniel lived at the time when the Babylonians, which is many, many, many years after Nimrod, after Israel as a nation, and Israel's in their land, and God judges Israel because they break his law and they worship other gods. And so first God sends the Assyrian Empire against the northern kingdom of Israel, and they disperse the people. And then God sends Babylon against the southern kingdom called the kingdom of Judah. And Daniel was one of the people taken into exile in one of the early stages of, so before Nebuchadnezzar levels the Jerusalem in, I think was it 568 or 586 BC. Previous to that, in about 605, 602, 605, I'm not sure of the date, Nebuchadnezzar came against Jerusalem and took some of the young men into captivity, and Daniel was one of those people. And he shows himself with three of his friends who are faithful to God, shows himself, and they show themselves to be people with extraordinary insight. How could these four young Jewish people have such insight? They have it because they know their God, and their God gives them insight. So if you look at Daniel chapter 2, Daniel, there's a problem because Nebuchadnezzar the king has a dream. And in this dream, he wakes up and he then wants all his wise men and all those fortune tellers to not only tell him what his dream means, but to tell him the dream itself. He's not going to tell them anything. And in fact, they said in verse 4, the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, "O king, live forever. Tell the dream to your servants, we'll declare the interpretation." And the king replied to the Chaldeans, "The command from me is firm." King James says the dream is gone, but it's not. It literally means the word from me is firm. In other words, don't try and wangle your way out of this. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be made a rubbish heap. So there's quite a good incentive to try and find out what that dream is. And he says, But if you do declare the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts and a reward and great honor. Therefore declare to me the dream and its interpretation. Sounds fair, doesn't it? I mean, I'll tell you limb for limb, but if you do tell me, I'll reward you with riches and honor. So they can't do it. They don't know what his dream is. They can't read his mind. And so he starts to command for all the wise men of the kingdom to be bumped off. But when Daniel finds out, he says, give me time and I'll seek God. And he pulls his 3 friends, which they're Babylonian names that were given to them were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But here they're called Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those are their real names. And so they pray and ask God to show them. And this is why I'm bringing this in, because verse 20 to verse 23, God has given Daniel the dream and the interpretation. And this is the key to understanding the vision, his prayer. So this is what Daniel says in his prayer. Let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. It is he, that is God, who changes the times and epochs. He removes kings and establishes kings. And he gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. And that's Daniel and his 3 friends. It is he who reveals the profound and hidden things and knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. So what we have here is what Daniel is going to look at in terms of the dream, what Nebuchadnezzar dreamed, speaks about the future. But the future is in darkness. So much stuff we don't know, we can't see it. But light dwells with God. And so God gives some light in the midst of the darkness concerning the things that are going to come. And so what we see is a glimpse into the future. But what we see is a glimpse into the future that leads us to the coming of one who is like the Son of Man, which is Jesus. Okay? So look what it says. He changes times and epochs. So there are, in the future, there's going to be times and epochs. And he establishes kings and he removes kings. And so another king comes up, and another king comes up, and another king comes up. And the one behind it all is not Satan, but God. God changes the epochs and the times. God is the one who establishes those kings and he removes them. And this is the thing that we've got to put together, that these kings are not following God and they're not part of God's kingdom. But God gives them a time. So this king comes along the scene and it's almost like God says, okay, it's your time now. Let's see what you're going to do. Okay, you've run your course, out with you. Okay, next king. You're in place now. Let's see what you do. So in all this, even though we're dealing with the kingdom of Satan, God is still on the throne. And it's important to understand this, especially for the last days. Whoever is the last one on the throne, he's put there by God. And God has a purpose. And once he served that purpose, God will get rid of him.
And yet those kings are being controlled by Satan.
Oh yeah, they're part of Satan's kingdom. They're not part of God's kingdom.
No.
But God gives them time. God says, okay, it's your time now. So God's the one that changes the times and the epochs. And in the end, God's going to say, bye-bye to the lot of you. That's God. He's in control. He is the ruler, supreme. And his kingdom, you see, Satan thinks he can destroy God's kingdom. He thinks he can outsmart God, but he can't. So this is the dream, okay? Now Daniel goes to the king, and look at what it says in verse 27. Daniel answered the king and said, as for the mystery about which the king has inquired, Neither wise men, conjurers, magicians, nor diviners are able to declare it to the king. However, there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the latter days. Whatever this vision and this dream has to tell us about all the different times and epochs, ultimately it's pointing to the very end. That's when Jesus comes back. It's last days. So last days is not this. It's not here we are and here are the last days. It's not like that. It is part of one line that we are part of, and which is leading up. And remember, it's like this. So everything is connected. We are today connected to the end. So it's important to remember that, because this vision that he has starts in his day. So let's look at the dream itself. The dream is in verse 31. Okay. You, O king, were looking, and behold, there was a single great statue. So I'm going to do a line here. So let me put a line here. Okay, there's a single great statue. And I'm not an artist, so you're going to have to excuse me. It looks like he's got what he needs.
Pointy legs.
Yeah, I'm not an artist. Okay. Okay. So there's a large, great statue. It's very large and of extraordinary splendor. It was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. The head of that statue is made of fine gold. So we're going to draw a line here. Okay. Fine gold. Fine gold is the best kind of gold. Okay? And then it says, its breast and its arms of silver. So, its breast and its arms of silver. And it says here, its belly and its thighs of bronze. And then it says its legs of iron. And its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Okay. Partly of iron, partly of clay. And you continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands. So now we've got a stone. Okay. Stone is cut without hands. Stone. And what happens is, it says, it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time, and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So that stone then becomes a mountain, and it fills the whole earth. What an interesting dream. What does it mean? He tells him. So verse 36, this was the dream. Now we tell you its interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand, and he's caused you to rule over them all. You are the head of gold. And then in verse 39 it says, then after you will arise another kingdom. So the minerals here, these parts, speak of two things. They're one and two things at the same time. They are the king and they are the kingdom of that king. Because Babylon was a kingdom that had more than one king in it. Nebuchadnezzar, you had Nebuchadnezzar's son, and then you had his grandson Belshazzar. They were all the kings of Babylon, but it's all part of the one kingdom. So the kingdom and the king are represented by the same thing. Okay? It is both the king and the kingdom. You, king, are the head of gold. Now what's interesting is gold is more precious than silver, which is more precious than bronze, it's more precious than iron, and more precious than iron and clay. But the talk about the hardness of the metal is this starts softer and it gets harder. Apart from the clay. The clay is brittle. This is more enduring than this, which is more enduring than this, which is more enduring than this, which is more enduring than this. But what's interesting is these kingdoms, as we'll see, grow in like this is shorter than this one, which is shorter than this one, which is shorter than this one, but the last one will end up being quite short. He says, you are the head of gold. And then it says, then there will arise another kingdom inferior to you. And this one, you'll notice that this arm unintentionally is longer than this arm. But it's right because this kingdom was called the Medes and the Persians. But the Persians were more dominant than the Medes. So this kingdom is Babylon. Okay. And it reigned, we've got the dates here, it was set up in 627 BC and ended in 539, and that's a total of 88 years. Okay, 88 years. The Medes and the Persians took over in 539, but they lasted till 331 BC, which is a total of 208 years. Yeah, it just gets longer and longer and longer. Now the third kingdom of bronze is Greece. And Jacob Prasch makes a very good point that this is the area of reproduction. Okay? And Greek culture was like that. It just took over, this Greek culture just took over all these other civilizations, and they just embraced Greek learning, Greek language, Greek culture. It just kind of reproduced itself in all these other nations. And the Greek Empire started in 331 BC and went to 31 BC, which is about 300 years. Okay. And then iron, the legs of iron, speaks of Rome. And Rome, some people believe this one, bronze, is both Greek and Roman. So some people hold to that. They would see the iron as the Islamic East. But most people would say this is Greece and Rome comes after Greece, because Rome didn't just emerge out of Greece, they took over the Greek Empire and they expanded it even further. And Rome was cruel. Rome really expanded itself through military might. Alexander did, but he allowed people, I think he just, a lot of people actually liked Alexander, like the Jews liked Alexander because he said you can do whatever you want, you can live the way you want. He didn't impose his culture. The Romans, they said you can do whatever you want, but you have to worship our ruler, our king, Caesar. You have to hail him as Lord. And if you didn't, you were accused of being an atheist. Early Christians were accused of being atheists because they only worship Jesus. So here, Rome, they thought up of unspeakable, torturous cruelties to try and keep people in line, because they were big into what's called Pax Romana, Roman peace. And so it's like if you sin against the empire and you sin against the emperor, you're destroying the fabric of society. That was the way they saw it. So if you're a Christian and you won't recognize our king, then you're the enemy of society. Now, initially, churches were protected because the Jews made a deal with the Romans and said, look, we won't pray to you, but we'll pray to our God for you. And then the Romans were like, okay. And so when the Christians started, Christianity was seen as another sect within Judaism, just a part of Judaism. So Christians were protected until the synagogues kicked them out and said, you're not part of us. And eventually the Roman emperors, they didn't give that protection to Christians anymore. And so Christians were required to burn incense on a fire and say, he's Caesar is Lord. So they were like iron. They were cruel. They ruled with military might and tried to build up their empire. And Rome's basically, after the time of Constantine, split into two legs. The eastern leg and the western leg. The western leg was based in Rome. The eastern leg was based in Constantinople. And this began, so the western leg, after the time of, so you got Constantine, which is about 300 and something AD. Constantine, he took it to Turkey and he founded Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul. They were called the Byzantine Empire. I can't even write it here because there's not enough space, but I'll just put a B for Byzantine. The western leg was centered in Rome, and the Church of Rome basically stepped into the place that Constantine left. So the Bishop of Rome said, I am the emperor, and we are the supreme church. The Eastern churches disagreed, so they just stayed separate. And so you have your Catholic stream and you have your Eastern Orthodox stream. So your West and your Byzantine were separated. The western part of the beast, or of the statue, basically fell in 476 BC as a Roman power, a Roman secular power, but this was taken over. Basically, the Catholic Church really took that political power over and tried to rule over the Western countries, Europe, basically. The Byzantine held out a lot longer, but it fell in 1453 AD, and the Muslim Turks took over. And so the eastern leg was taken over by Islamic, Muslim, Turkish people, but then there were Arabs as well. So you've got to understand, in the Islamic world, you've got the Turkish agenda and you've got the Arab agenda. So the Turkish agenda is being run by like Erdogan today, the president of Turkey. He would love to see a Turkish caliphate again. The Arabs, they didn't want a Turkish caliphate. So when the British came in and the European forces came in around the early 20th century, then they took, basically, they put an end to the Ottoman Turks. They took an end to the Turkish Empire, and they split the countries between them. So Syria and I think Lebanon was France, and what they called Palestine was British. And what the Arabs wanted is, we want an Arab caliphate. We want one Arab state, because the people who are Arab are one. They basically wanted that, and the British basically parceled up the land, and the Europeans parceled up the land. And there's where you've got this whole two-state issue between Arabs and Jews, because the Arabs wanted the whole land. They didn't want a Jewish state there. But it's all part of this eastern leg of the empire. Now, eventually, you're going to have 10 toes. The two legs are going to be iron and clay. So what we've got here is the same empire in some way comes together in the end. Rome is going to be reconstituted, but it's not reconstituted Europe from a European side. It's not just the one leg that's going to be in existence, it's west and east. The Roman Empire went from Scotland, the border of Scotland, down to Libya and Egypt, and as far east as the Caspian Sea, and included the Levant, which is Syria, Lebanon, Israel. That was all part of the Roman Empire. Europe doesn't include a lot of those countries. Turkey at the moment wants to become part of the European Union. Turkey is the bridge between East and West. So it's actually worth looking at Turkey. But the last one is iron and clay. And it says here, go back to this, and really these feet are part of this one. You've got to kind of think that this iron and clay is actually a reconstitution of iron, Rome. So in some way, Rome is coming back in some way. And it says here in verse 40, so there'll be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, and inasmuch iron crushes and shatters all things, so like iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces. In that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom. So it will become a divided kingdom in the end. Okay? And then it says here, as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so the kingdom will be strong, and some of the kingdom will be strong, and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. So this combination of east and west, of iron and clay speaks of humanity, and some people think it speaks of democracy. That's what some people think. So if a guy called Thomas Constable thinks it could speak of democracy, because democracy is the will of the people. Clay is humanity, but mixed with iron, and it mixes in the seed of men. Now, at the moment, if you have to look at west and east, where's the iron? Would you see the iron, the crushing kind of temperament in the west or in the east? East. The west is governed by democracy. But they try and mix in the seed of men through intermarriage. But it can never work. They don't adhere to one another. And you've seen some of these cross-cultural marriages between Islamic East and Western idealistic people who are in dreamland, and they think it's going to be wonderful. And it is wonderful until they go back to a Muslim country and then realize what they actually have to do to be a good Muslim wife. And suddenly it's not nice anymore. They try and mix in the seed of men, but they can't adhere to one another. In some way, I believe, see, some people concentrate on the eastern side, and they say it's Islam is the end thing is going to be Islam. The last empire that's coming before she's come back is Muslim. And then other people say, no, it's Europe. Rome was based in Europe. Europe's going to be the end time empire. It's probably both. Coming back together again. Turkey's the bridge between the two. But they're not going to stick. They're not going to stick. Now what's interesting is when this stone comes cut without hands and smashes all of them. So in some way, when we get to this point, something of this, and this must be there for the stone to crush them all together. So for us, Babylon's history. Babylon is an empire, it will never be rebuilt. It had its day. But something of Babylon has to re-emerge at the end for this stone to crush it. Something of Greece, or something of the Medes and Persians, has to re-emerge here for it to be crushed. something of Greece has to be there and something of Rome. It's a composite. The stone without hands, look at verse 44. In the days of those kings, and the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms. So these kingdoms in some way, maybe not as empires, but in some way they re-emerge at the end. It says it put an end to all these kingdoms, but it itself will endure forever. Inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it crushed the iron and the bronze and the clay and the silver and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future. So here's the thing. The stone is Jesus. Jesus, but not Jesus by himself, Jesus on behalf of the saints. And the saints are two groups of people, us and Israel. We're all saints. So Jesus will get rid of all these empires, and he becomes a mountain which fills the earth, and mountains speak of kingdoms. So Jesus is going to be the global kingdom that will fill the whole earth, and the saints, he does so on behalf or with the saints. So we will rule and reign with Christ, and Israel will become prominent among the nations. It will be their kingdom.